Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities in Miniatures. It is time for some brand spanking new Obscurities in literature. Now, this particular book in front of us today is one that I have been trying to get my hands on for quite some time. It finally happened, and the problem it's hard to get a copy for a reasonable price. It's been out of print for a few years now. And it's a big, nice hardcover. Oh boy, this is from 1999. So, yikes, that's at least 25 years ago. That's a scary thought. I know the artist was still alive at the time of its publication, so that says something as well. And what's funny is this past trip when I picked this up in Japan was particularly lame in terms of acquiring hobby goods. Prices just weren't all that hot. In the past, I've been able to get really good deals, especially like secondhand stuff, and I just felt like everywhere I went, either the selection was kind of blah, or there just wasn't anything that really grabbed my attention. I mean, not to say that there wasn't any cool stuff, but I also had to lug it home, which was going to be an issue. So, in the end, we settled for a whole lot of literature and then got yelled at for a significant amount of time for the sheer weight of the amount of books that I ended up bringing home. But this one is just a really cool one. The artist in question is, Komatsuzaki Shigeru. That doesn't sound right. Komatsuzaki. I knew it was Komatsu something. Komatsuzaki Shigeru. But anyway, this guy, Komatsuzaki, I said it wrong again, Komatsuzaki, was probably one of the most prolific artists in the late Showa era. So like from Showa being, earlier than 40, up until like the 90s. But this guy was mainly operating in the 50s through the 70s, did some occasional work after that, but just his artwork was everywhere in Japan during that period, especially in the boys' stuff. But this book is particularly cool, and I've got some other books here hanging around that have actually quite a lot of Komatsuzaki's art, which we can take a look at later. This is just, I love these crazy, garish illustrations from like the old 60s and 70s magazines. Just absolute nonsense science and stuff. But a lot of these were actually done by Komatsuzaki as well. Not everything, obviously. Some of these you can tell there's some very different styles going on there. Oh, look at that fashion. Oh, yeah. But anyway, we'll get to... we can look at these later. Some of his work actually had found its way into a lot of online memes and stuff. This one is great. It has all of these apocalyptic endings of the planet Earth. I know there's a famous one with this is the one I remember seeing. That is a Komatsuzaki piece. I know that for sure. There's a famous one. I know this one. Even certain people have tweeted it online, but yeah, this is absolutely Komatsuzaki's work. It just has a very, I don't want to say rough, a very defined look to it of a certain era. But anyway, none of that is in this book. This book is really cool, and the reason it's kind of pricey, and I actually got a really good deal just because there's like nicks and scuffs on the cover, is because this is the world of plastic model packaging of Shigeru Komatsuzaki. This is nothing but model box artwork, and I think if you're of a certain age, or at least of a certain era of spending time in hobby shops, a lot of this stuff, number one, may look really familiar. Number two, you might have actually owned it. But number three, it definitely has that evocative look that really, for a lot of guys and girls, really was what got them interested in model building. And I'll be absolutely honest, I grew up that my family was always building models, and while I didn't have a whole lot of interest in the history of it when I was young, looking at the artwork just gripped my imagination. There's action, there's, just really well detailed, nuanced looks to this stuff. And what's really cool about this book also is that there's a little bit of everything in here. Obviously, we're looking at World War II battleships, and if you're paying close attention, you'll notice as well that you have all sorts of different manufacturers showing up in here. I don't even know who Crown is. What's kind of cool also is, in this book, we have the names of whatever the kit is. We have the company that created it, as well as the scale. Rubber powered. Interesting. Personally, I've never been into naval models, mostly because there's not as much action going on in them. And he absolutely was not only painting Japanese subjects. Obviously, you saw the Thunderbirds stuff on the front of the book. Some of these kits, obviously that is a Tamiya kit. We've seen Bandai, we've seen Nichimo in here. I always love like the pictures of the cars going around the track. Driving through the savannas. That should be a familiar looking face to certain generations of science fiction fans. For the longest time, I didn't actually know that the Thunderbirds, or most of the Jerry Anderson stuff in general, was actually, marionettes and puppet work. Because my introduction, I never saw the show until I was significantly well past its intended age. I was probably in my 20s or older. Most of my time spent was seeing artwork like this. And I mean, I know that Komatsuzaki did a ton of these. I just loved the designs. I knew absolutely nothing about it because obviously in the days before the internet, in the early 80s, at least in the US, I mean, eventually, I just saw the paintings. I figured, oh, those are just the characters. I didn't realize they were puppets until much, much, much later. Going to science fiction conventions and the like and, seeing what they really were. But just the artwork itself is great. I want to say like some of these pieces were actually just done as big promotional posters and then they were brought back for packaging purposes. Well, Imai made these. I'm going to have the island. Of course. Captain Scarlet even. Now these are the kinds of shots that I really liked. And still do. When you have these action scenes, obviously the kit in question is at the focal point, but then you've got all this other stuff going on in the background. It was just as cool, I thought. Especially when you have like the ships dogfighting and blasting away at each other. Thunderbird moon bases. UFO. Huh. Now that I didn't know they made. Interesting. From 1980. Huh. And anytime we get wildlife or action scenes in these kinds of shots, I was there for it. Man, there's a ton of Anderson stuff in here. I always figured, like artists like Chris Foss and, the guys that were doing a lot of the sci-fi spaceship paintings, late 60s, 70s on, some of this stuff had to have been a major influence on them. It's the same kind of, it evokes the same kind of feeling for me. And then we get to my personal favorite section, is it's time for the robots. Oh, and Batman while we're at it. Or I guess this is just sci-fi stuff in general that just wasn't tied down to anything. It's just crazy, totally unrealistic science fiction machines. Space science crawler. Giant shocker machines. Come on, look at these as they're erupting from the ground with the moon base in the back. I mean, I loved that stuff. I still do. I've always been like a fan of like that retro futurism before I even knew what that meant. But then again, as I said, you know, growing up with a family that was very into model building and that kind of genre work and just the things that kind of go along with that really definitely made an impact on me. Well, who would not want? I would want to build a model of that. That's awesome. Now, I didn't know he did these. Now, I remember actually seeing these, the reissues of the Mazinga kits, and they were god-awful looking. But, you know, considering when they were made, 1973, 74 for Great Mazinga, I bet they had the Getter Robos. Yep. I feel like I built one of these Getters. Look at the old school Bandai logo even. May not be going to guy level of craziness, but good old Grendizer. 200 yen. That's another thing that really kicked me this last trip is, you know, I can see the inflation. I remember first going and, you know, picking up SD Gundams, and I'll tell you, I mean, there was a point I've built every SD Gundam that was in existence, probably in the late 90s. I own just about all of them or built them. I can remember when they were like 200-300 yen. And this last trip I was looking at some and they were like, you know, minimum 1,000 yen or up. It's kind of sad. Daikumaru. Blowing all the tanks away. I don't remember the tanks of the enemies looking like that in Gaiking. But it's been a long time. That looks like Combat V. Which it says right there in English too. Of course, gotta have secret bases. I mean, the only thing, I guess, if we really wanted to complain and nitpick about a book like this, is it would have been really cool to actually have a picture of the kit right next to it. We get into the Ultraman stuff. I know my son was checking this out. And even better than Ultraman is you get all of the weird, lesser-known stuff like Silver Mast, Silver Common here. What's his name? Kitty Fire or something? He had some weird enemies. Yeah. In fact, there we have a kit of Kitty Fire. He doesn't look like a cat, but he's called Kitty Fire. It looks like Mirror Man, though. It doesn't look like Silver Mask. Who is this? Oh, Zone Man. Zone Fighter, I think. Robot KGK. Baron 1. Nazuman in his flying car with teeth. I mean, I don't know what kind of drugs Ishinomori was on in the 70s when he was coming up with his stuff. I mean, again, more secret base artwork. Red Baron. Robocon. Oh, Ninja Arashi. King Robo. I have no idea what that even is. Again, there's just page after page. Go Ranger, the original Sentai series from 1975. Kiter. Haven't seen much in the way of Common Riders, but they're there too. Again, you got all that action going on the cover. Everything hand painted the way it should be. Now we're into dinosaurs. Come on. I mean, like I said, everything is in this. Kaiju. Bugs. Of which I have built a few. Beetle bugs. Model kits, that is. Okay, we've got rampaging buffalo bowling games. Okay, don't know what it's all about, but seems interesting. Getting into airplane kits now. Oh, and tanks. So like I said, as this video continues to just wind on, I always love looking at. I know there's some books, if you're curious about this kind of stuff, I know there's some books that Tamiya put out of similar stuff, not just one specific artist, but of a lot of different people's work in that regard, doing all of the painted artwork for their kits. I mean, it was a real art to me, and I'm sure to many others. It really got your interest in what was going on. And eventually, you know, this is the kind of stuff that would lead me to want to start learning a little bit about the history, and then we get into the background of the artist and into a bunch of his other works, which is always kind of cool to see. But again, just a really cool book, especially if you're of that mindset of spending that time in the hobby shops. There's a lot to love in this book, especially if you grew up seeing this stuff too. So we will have definitely more stuff from him in the future, because I know I have some other things of his, but hopefully at least that should whet your appetite and get you on a nostalgic kick down memory lane like I have every time I open this book. So with that said then, this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we will see you back here soon. Bye-bye.